Hola, yo soy Pedro Rey. Bienvenidos. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books, number 41. Our first book today is State of a Union by Jerry Oppenheimer, 2000. This book is about the complex marriage of Bill and Hillary Clinton. A political marriage, the goal of the presidency. That was years ago. They became, when Bill Clinton was elected in 1992 and re-elected in 1996 as U.S. president. So it talks about these two very interesting people. Of course, Bill Clinton, who was a really extremely talented and really a genius, political genius, real people person, very outgoing, very charismatic, very intelligent, and very knowledgeable. He read a lot of books. Actually, a good guy, except he couldn't be faithful to his wife. He had these other women in his life, and they're, of course, if you're a conservative, maybe you wouldn't go for his politics, but he was able to win people over. Hillary, on the other hand, was very, very strong-spirited, very determined, very hardworking, very smart, but she didn't have the personality that Bill had, and of course she ran twice. She had two strong efforts to become president herself in 2008 and 2016, and she didn't make it. But anyway, they're an interesting couple, and of course they've been in the public eye for a very long time, since 26 years. Very interesting. You wonder if she'll run again. I don't know. It's pretty tough when you lose, when you're nominated by a major party and don't make it. The next book is Relationship Rescue by Philip C. McGraw, Ph.D., 2000. My mother gave this book to me, and Dr. Phil, this famous guy on television, who helps people with their relationships, with these issues in family life and so forth. And he's a good guy. He talks about how you need to understand your partner. This is about marriage. Understand your partner and understand yourself. Of course, I think he's a good fellow. He has a positive influence on the world. Extremely successful, his television program. And he gets into these, tough relationships and tries to get people help from if they need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous or rehab or whatever, or get counseling. So he's a good guy. Tries to make a contribution. He's been very successful. He has a good spirit. The next book is Hunger of Memory: The Education of Richard Rodriguez, an Autobiography, 1982. So the author is a Mexican American, and he moved to the U.S. from Mexico and became very successful. But however, he lost his culture, language, and his parents. So he's talking about, I guess he was ambivalent about his life, that he had succeeded in America, but, he also, he gained and lost because he really adopted American culture and felt like he lost his Mexican culture. And I guess he stopped speaking Spanish, and he became apparently alienated from his parents, who remained Mexican, So this is a very interesting topic of what immigrants go through. A lot of, you hear immigrants who struggle. Well, this guy actually did well financially in his career, but there's the issue of culture and kind of, change, when you move to another country, it changes you. You inevitably adopt some of the culture that you're in, and you lose some of your own culture. But anyway, so he was kind of seemed to have regrets here about what he'd been through. This is life. You can't have everything. The next book is Miracles on Maple Hill by Virginia Sorensen, 1956. This is an outstanding children's book. I read it out loud to our son Tim. Talks about it's a novel about a family that moves to the country where the beauty of nature heals their city blues. They were living in the city and they had their problems, and they get into the maple sugar business. We had these maple trees, and apparently you can get maple sugar sap from the trees. You tap the tree, have these pipes that you put in the tree, and The father in the book is a World War II shell-shocked veteran. So that was really the root of the family's problems. The father, of what he'd been through in the war. Now they call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Guys who've been traumatized by war. And so, anyway, so they're living in the city where this family has a troubled father, and then they move to the country, and where they find healing through a simple living through nature. This is the challenge of city life, of being nature deprived. So this is a wonderful book. The next book is Popcorn Days and Buttermilk Nights by Gary Paulsen, 1983. Gary Paulsen is this wonderful children's book author. I read this book out loud to our son Tim. And now the main character in the book is a boy named Carly, who was getting in trouble in Minneapolis, in the city. And somehow I believe he was sent to a small town where he lived with his uncle, who was a kind blacksmith. And he learned to have, this troubled young man learned to live a good, simple life. And, he was, this is the issue of young people. He was, in school, but probably really bored in school. So in this case, it turns out that, physical work really helped him. And blacksmith work. You don't hear about blacksmiths much anymore, but anyway, he was working with, and this, of course, kindness. This uncle is very kind to him. He needed someone to be kind, and he needed some work to do. And apparently he found fulfillment in working as a blacksmith, and helping him get through this troubled time in his life when he was a young fellow, a young teenager who had been a juvenile delinquent. Wonderful book. The next book is My Side of the Mountain by Jean Craighead George, 1959. Yeah, the author is this wonderful author of children's books. I read this out loud to our son Tim. It won the Newbery Award. And the main character is Sam Gribley, who is 14 years old. He runs away from his New York City home and lives in the wild, and lives through hunting. And he has a knowledge of nature. Now, I can't tell you how he developed this, but this same theme, people having problems in the city and going out into the country and living in nature, living kind of like an American Indian. Not sure how he acquired his knowledge of nature, but he was determined to make a go of it, and he's fed up with city life. I guess he's getting in trouble. In the city life, cities have good points. But also bad points. Sometimes people get tired of it and get worn out from all the people and all the noise and the commotion and the hustle and bustle. And so in this fellow was yearning for the peace of nature. And so this is what he did. And this is what Jean Craighead George constantly promotes in her books is nature and animals and the great outdoors. Wonderful book. The next book is Love Me, Hate Me by Jeff Pearlman, 2006. This book is about Barry Bonds, who is the all-time home run king. He broke the record that Hank Aaron had set. Aaron had 755 career home runs, and Bonds hit 762. The title describes Bonds this book as the making of an anti-hero. He's the son of Bobby Bonds, who was a tremendous player, Major League Baseball player himself back in the 70s into the 80s. Bobby Bonds had a severe drinking problem, and he died relatively young. And his son Barry was even better, incredibly talented. And the book talks about how, from a young age, people tolerated Barry Bonds being a jerk or misbehaving, because of his tremendous baseball talent. This is one of the problems that athletes can have, tremendous athletes, that, we all need to behave, and the average, when you misbehave when you're a kid, you get in trouble. Now, in the case of tremendous athletes, sometimes they get away with misbehaving, and now this really hurts them, because then, their character deteriorates. They don't become a good person, and they become arrogant and selfish and very often cruel. So, according to this book, his talent has been a curse. He's the home run king, but many people hate him. If he could change his character, maybe he'd be respected for his incredible baseball achievements. Bonds had wealth and fame, but a lousy life. God bless Barry Bonds. Yeah, of course, he also was implicated in the whole steroid scandal, which, really hurt his reputation. Aside from the fact that, he wasn't a good guy, and that's a real shame, because, this is what's important in life is being a good person, in my opinion. And, so if you can achieve all this worldly success, but not be a good person, then you're a loser. Yeah, so it's no good. So it's really sad. So we'll see. Hopefully, he's still a young man. See how he gets along. He's retired now, and so God bless him. That's one of the pitfalls of fame. The next book is The Dog Who Wouldn't Be by Farley Mowat, 1957. Oh, I love this book. Wonderful book. Of course, Farley Mowat is the tremendous Canadian author who writes about Canada, especially the wildlife and the remote areas. And he talks in this book about his boyhood in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in the 1920s and 1930s. I sent this copy, or I gave this copy to my mother because she had grown up in Regina, Saskatchewan in the same time period. So she actually, I know she got several, she loved it, she got several copies, really reminded her of her childhood because they grew up in the same time period and pretty much the same place, although not in the same city. Same Western Canada province, Saskatchewan. And he has this, talks a lot about his dog Mutt that his father, Farley's father, had gotten for hunting. But Mutt was not a good hunting dog. That's why the title, The Dog Who Wouldn't Be. He wouldn't be the dog. He was just kind of this fun, happy dog so they go out trying to hunt. They have adventures with ducks, owls, and skunks. So it's a wonderful story, and this is Farley Mowat's childhood with this beloved dog from his childhood and the experiences they had, and also with his father. And so it's a wonderful book. Really recommend it. I recommend actually all of Farley Mowat's books. The next book is The Boat Who Wouldn't Float by Farley Mowat, 1969. You can see the title is kind of similar. Same author. Wonderful book. And this book is set in the eastern part of Canada by the ocean, specifically in Newfoundland, which is this, on the east coast of Canada. Very cold region. And and Farley Mowat had this boat. He was interested in the wild, and so traveling. This is an area, the Atlantic coast of Canada, where if you want to travel, boats are probably your best bet. And this boat that he acquired sank a lot. He had all kinds of problems with it. That's why he called it The Boat Who Wouldn't Float. And he was navigating it in this very tough area, very, very cold, ice-cold ocean. And then he talks about the people in the region, rugged, friendly fishermen or fisher people. And so that's what he's talking about. Although the thing that I didn't like, there's too much drinking. And Mowat survived this trip. And actually, he ended up, he traveled around the east coast of Canada. And then he decided to go to Expo 67, 1967, in Montreal. I think it was Montreal. And actually, our family went there when I was 7 years old, Expo 67. It was an international, like a World's Fair. And Mowat traveled by boat and through the St. Lawrence Seaway. And he made it all the way there. And that's how the book ends, where he's at Expo 67. But the thing is, it's kind of a sad ending because when he gets there, the early part of the book is more interesting, where he's sort of in these remote, wild regions. And when he finally gets to Expo 67, there's just so many boats and so many people, and it's so congested. And he didn't like those types of situations. But so anyway, this is a wonderful, wonderful book by Farley Mowat. The next book is World Walk: One Man's 4-Year Journey Around the World by Stephen M. Newman, 1989. This is an incredible book. This is story of a guy who walked around the world, or walked wherever he could. He didn't walk on the ocean. But he starts in Bethel, Ohio, and walked to the Atlantic Ocean. and then he took a ship across the Atlantic to Ireland. Then he walked across Ireland, walked across Scotland, and then quite a few countries. He walked across England, France, Spain, Morocco in North Africa, Algeria, Italy, Yugoslavia, Greece, Turkey, Pakistan, India, Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, Western United States, and back to his home in Bethel, Ohio. Wow, what an adventure. And he actually did this aside from travel, wanting adventure, he had a belief that people were good. If you watch the news, there's all this things, bad things happening in the world, and people become pessimistic about human beings. But he said no, he was a very strong Christian. And he wanted to travel and see if people would help him along the way. And they did. Many. Of course, sometimes he did have a backpack and a tent and a sleeping bag, but very, very often people would invite him into their homes in many, many countries. So he experienced a lot of kindness around the world, and it reaffirmed his faith in the goodness of humanity and the goodness of human people. Of course, he also had tough times. He almost died because of some of the conditions he faced. He received a lot of kindness. And, there was, some of the people were cruel. There was cruelty. Of course, this is part of the reality of life. And he really liked France and India and the United States. The worst was Morocco in North Africa, where he was attacked by beggars. These, some of these countries are so poor. And, North Africa, the Sahara Desert. He was surrounded by beggars, and he actually had to, fight them off. He also was imprisoned in Turkey and Yugoslavia for whatever reasons. Some of these countries can be challenging because of the politics, but he eventually was released. And in Australia, he had to battle nature in Western Australia. The very tough, the Western Australia has this desert, and I think there was the mosquitoes and flies were pretty tough. So, wow, this author, what a brave, kind, good man. What an adventure. Wow, this is one of the best books ever, and I really admired the author. I think this is an incredible thing that he did. And he did show, despite some problems that he had, but almost, I think, 90% of the people that he encountered were kind and were very good to him and helped him. And very often would offer him a meal or offer him to stay. He could stay in their home. The next book is Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell, 2005. What an interesting book. Yeah, this is what an interesting title. This was given to me by Mike Duff, good friend of mine. Very interesting. And it's all about the assassinations of 3 U.S. presidents, Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, and William McKinley, by Johnny Booth, or they used to call him John Wilkes Booth, Charles Guiteau, and Leon Calzas. So, Lincoln was assassinated in 1860, shot and killed. Garfield in 1880, and then McKinley in 1901. With Lincoln, it was because of the Civil War related. With Garfield, I think the guy was mentally ill, and then with McKinley, the guy was an anarchist, one of these crazy political guys. So the author, Sarah Vowell, she's talking a lot of history, but she also travels. She travels to the places where these 3 U.S. presidents were killed. Lincoln in Washington, D.C. at Ford's Theater, and Garfield also in Washington, I think it was at the train station. And then McKinley, I believe, in Buffalo, New York, if I'm not mistaken. And she also has a good sense of humor. She talks about Robert Todd Lincoln, the son of Abraham Lincoln, who became actually pretty famous himself. And so this is a wonderful book because she combines history and travel and comedy. She has a wonderful personality, and this is a very entertaining book. That's why she calls it Assassination Vacation. She took a trip to the places where these 3 men were shot and killed, and also places where the assassins, where I believe where they were buried, or learns about their lives. She talks about the lives of the three presidents and the three assassins, and all the details. It's a very, very entertaining book. I really recommend it. A good history book. It's very, very, very entertaining. The next book is Philippine History and Government by Leodivico Cruz and Laksamana, 1999. This is a textbook on Philippine history. I thought it was very interesting. The author talks about Miguel Legazpi, who was the man who led the conquest of the Philippines and the Spanish conquest in 1565, and he's buried in San Agustin Church in Intramuros in Manila. And then there's actually a city, Legazpi City. My sister-in-law Stella was always talking about Legazpi City. So I believe that my wife's family lived there for a time. Of course, Jose Rizal, the national hero, wrote these wonderful books, Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, which really inspired Filipinos to believe in themselves and to fight for independence. Emilio Aguinaldo, who I admire very much, who was the main leader in the War of Independence. The tragic Andres Bonifacio, who actually started the War of Independence, but then he lost leadership of the revolution, and then started a rebellion within the revolution. So it was like a civil war within the revolution, and of course he was arrested and executed. Very, very tragic. Gloria Maris, there's a restaurant named after her. Barasoain Church in Malolos, Pampanga. I think that was where they had, maybe the inauguration of Aguinaldo. There's actually a Barasoain Church in San Juan, or in Metro Manila, not far from where we lived, or still live. Jose Abad Santos. There's another street near us, and he was the Supreme Court Chief Justice in the World War II, and it was he was executed by the Japanese. He was acting president actually when President Quezon left the Philippines, and before he was executed, he told his son that not to cry, that it was this honor to give his life for his country. Of course, his son was feeling horrible about losing his father. Ferdinand Marcos, the elected president, reelected and then became dictator. Cory Aquino, who restored democracy to the Philippines. Carlos P. Garcia, whom my wife Alice says her father met, and we had a photograph that I guess has been lost, and we believe that my wife's family is related, the Garcia's family related to him. The next book is The House of 30 Cats by Mary Calhoun, 1965. This is a wonderful children's book. I read it out loud to our son Tim, and really fine story. This character, Miss Tabitha, has 30 cats, and I believe she had problems with the government. They thought this is a health hazard, and they were going to take away all of her cats and have them put to death. And there's a girl named Sarah who was friends with this elderly woman, Tabitha, who come to visit, and she found out that all of the cats would die if Sarah doesn't think of a plan to save them. And there is a happy ending. The 30 cats are saved, so it's a happy ending. Very wonderful book. The next book is You Gotta Believe by Tug McGraw with Don Yeager, 2004. Wonderful baseball book. Tug McGraw was a famous baseball player, a pitcher. He was on the 1973 Mets, who made it to the World Series. I think he was on the 69 Mets as well, and the 1980 Phillies won the World Series. He was on the mound. I know he got the last out when the Phillies won the World Series. So Tug talks about his life, and he talks about his irresponsible fatherhood. He believed he was not a good father. Actually, his son, Tim McGraw, is famous today as a famous actor and country music singer. And so this book talks about fame. Tug McGraw was a very famous guy and all the money that he had, and then he got into trouble with sex and drinking, and he died at age 59 from brain cancer. He's a very funny guy, but ultimately you can see, again, the pitfalls of fame and the problems that Tug McGraw had, and the fact that all this fame and wealth and fame had an effect on him, and he was not a good father to his children. So this is tragic. The next book is Circle of Gold by Candy Dawson Boyd, 1984. This is a wonderful children's book. The character Maddie, her father died, her mother is tired, and she gets bullied in school. So this is the challenges of childhood, this girl. But she strives and her family life gets better. Yeah, so especially losing her father, that would be very tragic. And then, of course, being bullied. That's why I love these children's books. It's always hopeful, that regardless of the challenges in life, and this character, things do improve. You think, because life goes on, what are we going to do? We have to make the best of it. And I know with God's help, we can be happy and productive, regardless of what sometimes the tough things that happen. The next book is The Trouble with Tuck by Theodore Taylor, 1981. Wonderful book. This is the author of The Key, and very touching book. It's the story of a love affair of 13-year-old girl named Helen and her dog Tuck. Tuck goes blind with tragic consequences. I believe the dog used to wander. It was set in a small town. The dog would wander around town and come home. But then, of course, he went blind, and that really changed everything. Made things very tough for him. But then they get a seeing eye dog for him, for Tuck. Usually you think of seeing eye dogs for adults that can't see, to help them to walk around and get places. So there's a happy ending, because Tuck has this seeing eye dog to help him to maneuver in town and continue living this life that he enjoyed of wandering around town and being a part of the community, not just stuck at home. Fine, wonderful children's book. I highly recommend it. The next book is The Great Wheel by Robert Lawson, 1957. This is a tremendous children's book. Really, really good. And also really good history. The character, Con Gilroy, is an Irish immigrant, and he works in New York City with his rich uncle building sidewalks and sewers. Then he goes to Chicago to help build the first Ferris wheel for the 1893 World's Fair. A Ferris wheel in these amusement parks where you go real high. They have one in Enchanted Kingdom in the Philippines. I don't like these because I'm afraid of heights. I stopped going on them because I don't enjoy it. But it's this huge wheel that takes you up high in the air and goes around and around. And according to this book, the first one was built in 1893 in Chicago, and this character was involved in building it. So after the World's Fair, Con Gilroy, he settles in Wisconsin with his German wife, and he establishes a dairy farm. In other words, cows and milk and so forth. So this is a really good history book and a children's book. And the origins of the Ferris wheel. Really good history. The next book is Rascal by Sterling North, 1963. This is an outstanding children's book. It's set in 1918 Wisconsin. Sterling is 11 years old. His mother had died, and his father gives him freedom. In other words, to do stuff. His brother is off fighting in the First World War, and he has a wonderful year with his best friend, Rascal, who is a raccoon. Oh, what a wonderful book. Simple outdoor pleasures. I can't remember how he established this friendship, but he did. They must have had a pet raccoon. So it's about a boy and his best friend, a raccoon named Rascal. Wonderful, wonderful book. Well, we're out of time. I hope you find a good book to read, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a good day. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.